For decades, the car industry drove Germany forwards, but for several years now, it's been stuck in reverse, and it's dragging the whole economy backwards with it. Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady and we're here in Berlin, where Germany is entering a third consecutive year of recession. And the one industry that has traditionally saved the German economy, the car industry, is struggling. A slump in demand for e-vehicles in Europe, coupled with a collapse in sales in China, are just two of the reasons. Add in the threat of tariffs by President Trump, and it all adds up to a perfect storm.
For decades, Germany led the global motor industry with its famous luxury cars, pushing the economy to its peak. But in recent years, the industry has stalled. Its transitions from combustion engines to electric vehicles has been slow, allowing cheaper Chinese EVs to populate the market. Car manufacturing bosses and politicians have been reluctant to recognize the issues.
I don't want to be impolite, but the European, and especially the German car industry, has little to fear from Chinese products. The best cars are built in Germany.
Sales have fallen across all of Germany's main car brands, Mercedes-Benz, BMW and Volkswagen, which has announced plans to close factories across Germany, putting thousands of jobs at risk. The car-making industry makes up around a fifth of Germany's manufacturing output and generates roughly 6% of GDP. It directly employs 780,000 people and supports millions of other jobs. The decline in Germany's car industry has contributed to the country's ongoing recession.
The economy in Germany is in a real crisis. Therefore, we need a real new beginning.
Einen echten Neubeginn.
Despite investment in electric vehicles, foreign competitors from China, as well as Elon Musk's Tesla, have strengthened their positions. The German government's decision to end EV subsidies, as well as threats of US tariffs, add to its woes. As Germany welcomes in a new chancellor, can Friedrich Merz's government jumpstart the country's struggling car industry?
Well, let's bring in our guests. I'm delighted to say we're joined by Chen. He is an associate professor in global media and information law, and he's also director of the Centre for Chinese Law and Policies. That's at Durham Law School. Peter Kuras is a journalist based here in the heart of Berlin. And Mareike Ohlberg, she's a senior fellow with the German Marshall Fund. You're all very welcome to this roundtable on the road here in Berlin. Mareike, to you first. Germany's failing car industry, is it bad decision-making or bad luck? What do you think has happened here?
I would say there are two root causes to what we're currently seeing, and that's two miscalculations or two problems that the German automotive industry ignored. The first one is kind of the bet on continued reliance on combustion engines. So the failure to switch to, electric vehicles, e-mobility, to new sources in the energy transition, right? They basically continue to bet on combustion engines. Now, this is kind of related to the second miscalculation, which is, I think some of them were quite aware that without moving into electronic vehicles, EVs, they wouldn't be able to sell cars in Europe that much longer, but they bet on the Chinese market. So the idea was, okay, we will be able to continue selling our cars on the Chinese market for a couple more years. Not in perpetuity, but we can continue to make profits for a couple more years. And that now broke away sooner than expected, in part because of the economic problems in China itself. People have less money to spend, so they're buying fewer cars. And of course, in other part, due to the Chinese homegrown competition. We now have companies like BYD that make EVs, electronic vehicles, at very competitive prices that are superior in the technology that they use. And that the combination of this has led to the Chinese market breaking away much sooner than or somewhat sooner than the automotive industry expected. So those are the two underlying causes. Now they're amplified by some things that are happening here domestically, some back and forth on decision making here in Germany as well, but I think those are the two most important factors to consider.
Peter, this really matters for everyone in Europe, really, because this has affected Germany's economy, and Germany has been the powerhouse of the European Union for so long.
Yeah, though as I understand it, the economic effects are not as drastic immediately as one might think. The auto industry is a substantial part of the German economy, but it's a diverse economy, and the real drivers of the economic powerhouse that has been Germany are more the Mittelstandunternehmen, the sort of mid-sized companies that are have been really good at competing on a global scale traditionally. It's less the powerhouses like VW, like Benz, like BMW. And I think that what we've seen here is that the arrogance of the elite in Germany and the sort of reactionary conservatism that has driven this decision making that Mareike just analyzed so thoroughly and wonderfully for us, are widespread in German society right now and causing the society to be uncompetitive in a number of areas.
It seems the Germans were heavily invested in China, rivers of money. Times were very, very good, and suddenly China decided to go make its own e-vehicles. The market fell away with sales. I mean, the Chinese are winning here, aren't they?
The recent development of Chinese automobile sector has certainly been challenging for many German car manufacturers, especially with regard to the rise of e-cars, hybrid cars, in contrast to the declining demand of fuel cars, traditional cars, let's say. On one hand, the EU has been quite hesitant about imposing a clear ban on the traditional cars, so this has created some uncertainties for German policymakers. They fear that the German roads might be filled with Chinese e-cars, whereas Germany itself is transitioning away from fuel cars. On the other hand, some German manufacturers also assert that this kind of concern about a flood of Chinese e-cars in Germany might be a little bit exaggerated, because after all, the volume of German cars they sell in China far exceeds that of Chinese cars here in Germany. So they would emphasize, for example, the acceleration of development of e-cars here, and perhaps establishment of more charging infrastructure in Germany.
And just tell me, did they not see this coming, the German car industry, that China would do its own thing, develop battery technology that was better than anything that's in Europe right now? I mean, have they been asleep at the wheel, literally?
They certainly are aware of that. So, but the thing is that German manufacturers rely heavily on Chinese market, so heavily that they might be sleeping away a little bit. So they are certainly, we know that the famous brands like the BMW, Volkswagen, or Mercedes-Benz, each of them generates more than 30%, let's say, of their revenues from the Chinese market. So they are certainly afraid of the EU tariffs hikes, the kind of tariffs, the trade war is going to affect them significantly. So if China, for example, retaliates heavily against the EU tariff hikes, these companies' profits might suffer significantly. So they would sometimes pretend to be not aware of this, perhaps.
Mareike, just on the issue of tariffs, how big a problem do you see this being for Germany's car manufacturing sector?
Depends which one you're referring to. If you're talking about like the European Union potential EV tariffs on Chinese cars, German automotive industry lobbied against that strongly. We saw Germany coming out against those simply because I think automotive was quite concerned about retaliation from China against itself. So they lobbied against that unsuccessfully. There is, of course, larger questions of other tariffs being imposed from the United States, which of course, adds significantly, or would potentially add significantly to the pressure that the industry is already under. Although, again, that's not the root cause of this, and this wouldn't, they'd still be in a lot of trouble without it, but it certainly exacerbates that. And maybe to add to to your other question, I think German automotive was quite aware of its larger structural problems, that its days were numbered in the end. They were quite aware of that. I do think that most among them were taken by surprise by how quickly China came out with its competitor products. I think they had assumed it would take a little longer, or it would take them much longer to develop these. So it's a mixture of, they were aware of their own decline in the long run, but we're taken aback just by how quickly China came out with its own products.
I mean, does that surprise you? Because everything we know about Germany, you know, planning, and historically people always saw Germany as very efficient, and companies that will be planning ahead and have everything in place, and it seems they've been caught short badly.
I mean, that's a bit of a stereotype. I'm not sure that necessarily applies to Germany. I will say I have been surprised by some of the lack of foresight and by some of the lack of action after people saw the problem coming, and especially the knowing that the days of the German car industry are numbered. Somebody could have tried to act on that, invest more in innovation, try to catch up, try to make decisions differently to try to mitigate some of the damage at least. And just having seen them sitting there, being, I think, quite aware of the general problem and not taking actions to correct the course has been quite shocking.
Peter, you're originally from the United States. President Trump has said that his favorite word in the English dictionary is tariffs. If he were to follow through on his threat of tariffs, say on German vehicles going into the American market, I mean, this is a perfect storm, isn't it?
I mean, I think first of all, we should say, I don't know how many words from the English dictionary Trump really knows. So I'm not, yes, I think that would be a perfect storm. Germany is extremely reliant on America, not only as an economic market, but also, you know, with England, to some degree with France. The Westbindung, they call it, the connection to the West has always been sort of central to German identity as a part of the democratic sphere. So I think, you know, both in terms of an economic identity or economic reliance, but also in terms of sort of cultural or political identity, that tie is already very thin. And, you know, if it's economically not there anymore, if it's economically endangered as well as sort of culturally endangered, I think we'll see Germany will start to have a real crisis of identity, I think. I don't know that there's a cultural core right now to lead Europe within Germany.
Good. To you, China has raced ahead in the battery stakes, and we all know that e-vehicles, this is completely the key issue, the battery technology. I mean, China has just raced ahead at a speed that certainly the Germans didn't think was going to happen.
Well, the Germans are certainly they would think like that, but this has been a historical process that the German manufacturers has been relying heavily on importing energy, low-cost energies from Russia, from other countries, and then produce, you know, high-end cars like, you know, those kinds of cars that I just mentioned, Porsche or BMW, and selling this to China. So they've been, my view is that they've been accustomed to this development over a period of a long time, and certainly they think about, they would think rather in a way that China has always been a loyal partner than as an adversary. So the recent developments, as Mareike just mentioned, has been quite shocking to many people, including the manufacturers themselves. So I don't think all of them have been waken up yet by this kind of trend.
So Mareike, to you, what does Germany do next? I mean, does it accept what has happened and just take a step back and say, okay, we're not going to lead the world in this, we will now be a mid-power in terms of car production? Or is there something with a new chancellor, a new government coming in, is there something Germany can do to fight back?
I mean, we'll have to see what the new coalition, once it's formed, is going to do about this. I mean, there's certainly going to be a lot of pressure from the automotive industry to improve conditions for itself. I don't know that those are necessarily good solutions to, they're asking for cheaper energy, less regulation, and various other advantages for themselves, which again might put a Band-Aid on this, but it's essentially a Band-Aid on a gaping wound. So I'm concerned that what they are asking for isn't really gonna fix the problem in the long run. That would require larger structural changes to one around deindustrialization in general, to make sure to try to slow down that process, and then also frankly diversify, like make sure that cars are not the main driver of the German economy or the European economy by extension. In the long run, I think it's good to diversify.
And tell me, do you think other sectors of the economy, if the car manufacturing industry is given special measures or additional help, will other sectors of the economy come out and say, well, hang on, you've done that for BMW and Audi and Volkswagen. What about this for us?
I mean, we'll see. There's quite a bit of a special relationship between the automotive industry and the German government, with access that a lot of other sectors don't necessarily have. Again, my main concern is ensuring that it's a solution that actually benefits the German economy and the German people as a whole, rather than trying to use small measures to prop up this industry in a way that doesn't sustain it in the long run.
Peter, it strikes me that they had it very, very good here for a long time, and they thought that the money rivers would just keep flowing.
I think, even more than the money rivers, there was an idea that Germany had a right or sort of an inborn capacity to dictate what a really great car was. That there was like a German thing that was a fast, luxurious car that was going really fast on the Autobahn, and that was the best thing that you could possibly drive. And I think the government that is likely to be formed is almost certainly going to be filled with people who are committed to that idea that freedom, that luxury involves going very, very fast in leather seats on the Autobahn. And I think it's just not really a relevant picture for the society that's emerging now. I think we need more diversity, not only in terms of economic sectors, but in terms of the people leading this country, like the rest of the world, need to be more responsive to the needs of people on the ground.
Good. Can you see Germany coming back, the German car manufacturing sector working out what it is it needs to do to take on China, or has China won?
Maybe it's helpful to look at this issue from a historical view. Now, the globalization wave following the end of the Cold War has, witnessed let's say, an unprecedented period of peace and prosperity. Chinese and German car industry both thrived under this kind of condition. And that has led many people, including those in Germany, to believe that this kind of model that, as I just mentioned, of importing low-cost energy from Russia to produce high-end cars for Chinese market will continue forever. However, the Trump presidency, the first term of Trump presidency, has announced an end to this. So kind of shifting away from globalization, perhaps also delinking or decoupling from China. Now, in his second term, we might see a more pronounced move away from this, right? So not only just affecting China, but also the U.S. traditional allies, including the European countries. So that might, put Germany at a crossroad where its traditional growth trajectory of automobile industry is now facing big challenges. Is Germany going to break with its past or break with its future? That's a very painful decision, I think, for the new government now to make, as well as for the industry people.
Mareike, just on the point of the new government coming in, as Go said, how big a priority do you think fixing the car industry will be for Friedrich Merz and everyone else?
I mean, I do think there will be pressure on him to try to fix this. I hope, again, that they're not going to narrowly try to fix something for the automotive industry in general, that they're going to view it as part of a larger picture of figuring out how the German economy can reorient itself and become sustainable with less of a strong car industry going forward. I do think they're also looking at some pretty fundamental changes in the international order. Friedrich Merz, after the elections in the so-called elephant round, where they bring together all the party leaders, was quite clear, more clear than I expected about what is happening in the United States and what that means for Europe. So he essentially questioned, what's NATO going to look like going forward? What's the transatlantic alliance going to be looking like going forward? And those are all massive potential changes they're going to have to factor into a lot of the decisions that the German government's going to have to make.
Have you confidence in Merz to make some changes?
I don't want to. I think I was positively surprised that he named some of those challenges. I think being aware that something is a problem and that's going to be a massive challenge is a good precondition for actually trying to fix it. Now that itself doesn't fix it, right? So I don't know, but I was positively surprised
that he's very much aware.
That he's aware of the issues and was also willing to name them quite clearly.
Peter, to you, just talk to me about the impact of the economic recession and regression that has happened in Germany. What does it mean to the average German person if the car industry is not firing on all cylinders here?
I don't know that the car industry by itself necessarily means that much. I think much more troubling is that it's a much broader morass. There's a much broader sense that there's not an industry that has a lot of energy behind it. There's not a clear political direction. There's not a sense of cultural unity. There's not a sense of a shared political or economic project, I think. I think what the recent election results showed us really is that there's not a strong political figure or party in the country at the moment. I mean, I think Merz is an incredibly weak leader. I think, most of the people I talked to didn't really know what it would mean to vote for the SPD at this point. The center-left party is just doesn't really have a political identity to speak of. The same is kind of true of the Greens. I think it's a very confused country with no real political or economic agenda at the moment. And, I'm not sure I trust Merz to change his underwear, and certainly not the economy.
Wow, that's pretty scathing stuff, Go. Just come in on that, Go, if you will. Merz, do you think he will address the fundamental issues and start getting German car manufacturing back on its feet?
Now, many people, including in China, hope that Merz will be the next strong man in Germany, as I have read recently in the newspaper. But I'm not quite sure about that Merz will become the next strong leader of the whole Europe. But he's definitely going to be willing to change the status quo. He's after all, he's worked for a long time in the German industry. He knows a lot about German economy, of course. I have no doubts about his economic knowledge. But as for the big trend of whether German car industry, it is actually an epitome of the German economy and perhaps the European life, way of life. So that's a very significant issue that the whole German nation would probably need to answer and think about carefully in the next 4 years, let's say, at least. But as far as I see, the whole politics is now changing a little bit in Europe as well. So can only say, let's wait and see.
Peter, just final point to you. How big of a talking point is this when you're out with German people? You've lived here for a very long time now. They must be worried.
I mean, I don't think people in my circle are very worried about the auto industry. I mean, granted, that's because I live in a major city. People here are more likely to rely on bicycles. They're more likely to rely on other kinds of industries. For people I talk to on a regular basis, the much more pressing concern is the cuts to the Berlin cultural funding, which is going to have absolutely disastrous effects on the city and on many of the people who rely on it. And I think the overemphasis on the struggles and the problems that are affecting the auto industry is really troubling to me in some sense, because everybody I know doesn't really rely on this culture industry that's going to be cut to shreds by the current city government and looks to be a trend for the country as a whole. So, I think it's important to keep in mind that Germany does have a diverse economy. The things that have been attractive about it, things that have made it a leading country in Europe for a long time, have not just been the economic strength of the auto industry. It's been also the cultural strength, which the country currently seems intent on renouncing willfully. So I'm not optimistic about that.
Good. This is music to Chinese ears, presumably. Just briefly, China must be very, very happy with its place in the car manufacturing world now that Germany is stepping back.
On the surface, as we discussed many times before, also in other sectors, the Chinese government and the Chinese nation are on top when they see that the car industry and some other industries like in the IEI and something other sectors are getting ahead of Germany, and they say this is of course because of the whole advantages of the centralized system that China is now standing on top of the world. At least that's the official stance, let's say. But of course, many people would hold different opinions about that. Also in China, this is fundamentally a significant issue for the German car industry to think about in future, as I just mentioned, whether it's going to break with the past or future.
Good, Chen, Mareike and Peter, thank you all so much for your contribution on this one. Remember, you can see more debate and discussion on our YouTube channel. Just go on there and search for Roundtable TRT World, and if you like what you see, please do hit that subscribe button. But for me, Enda Brady, and all of the Roundtable team here in Berlin, thanks for watching. We'll see you again very soon.